I believe that's about it. So we'll be doing this question portion after the opening statements until about 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, we'll switch over to the audience questions, have about 20 minutes or so of those, and then there will be closing statements at the end at about 8:20. So I wanted to introduce to you, if you don't know them already, this is candidate Phil Tavel, this is candidate Lisa Herbold. Can we give them a big round of applause for being here? We have spent a lot of time on the campaign trail over the past few months here. Lisa actually sprained her ankle coming up here. She's been campaigning so hard. Phil very nearly did that today as well. So I will be addressing them as candidate Herbold and candidate Tavel for the rest of the session here. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll just go in alphabetical order. Candidate Herbold, an opening statement, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody for being here tonight. And I want to thank as well the Westside Interfaith Network and the League of Women Voters and Our Lady of Guadalupe for putting this on. I am a West Seattle resident, lived in Highland Park since 2000. I have my daughter and her family of 4 here in West Seattle as well in an adjoining neighborhood to mine. I live in Highland Park. And I'm just really proud to have the honor of representing this district on the Seattle City Council. I have raised the bar for delivering constituent services. This is something that the Seattle Times honored me with, not just raise the bar for our district, but for the entire city. I have folks from other districts contacting my office to ask for my help with constituent services because of the work that not just me, but my office does in making sure that people know that our representatives in City Hall are working for you. That is my vision of governing. And we have really big challenges here in our city, but if I can work with you to raise your voice and address the nuts and bolts work that has to be addressed in order to improve your day-to-day lives in your neighborhoods, whether or not that's getting the street lights fixed on a street where there have been assaults, or getting better bus service, or getting a pothole fixed, or getting that park equipment replaced. That is the message that I can deliver to you, that I'm working for you, and through that, hopefully you have more faith in your democracy, and that we can work together on the really big problems as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Candidate Herbold. Candidate Tavel, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much, and again to the Westside Interfaith Network, and to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and to the League of Women Voters, and Brian, Lucy, thank you all for tonight, and to all of you, truly thank you for coming out, because, you know, it's amazing when you think that in August for the primary, there are 40,000 people in West Seattle that did not vote. So of those 68,000 voters, you prove that you care, that you're out here to listen to both of us, and you're going to be part of that democratic process. So for me, this whole journey actually started about 8 years ago, right before my son was born, and I started thinking about the city that he was going to grow up in, and the city that I've come to love. And I realized that I saw all of this incredible potential around Seattle that just went unrealized. You know, you had companies that were changing the face of the world, but not changing the face of our city. You know, all these incredible resources, you know, resources of personal resources, financial resources, environmental resources that weren't tapped into. And I started thinking about getting involved. So I got involved with the 34th Democrats. I eventually became the vice president of the Morgan Community Association. I'm on the board of directors of the Seattle Green Spaces Coalition. I'm vice president of the board of Allied Arts. I sit on the Southwest Precinct Advisory Council, and for 11 years now I've run a trivia night at Talarico's. And I've used that to raise money for the helpline, for the food bank, for the YMCA. And I love this community, I love this city, and I want to see it do better. The fact is, when you look at election, you ask yourself, what is the direction of the city? How is my home doing? And when I talk to people on the doors, overwhelmingly what they tell me is they don't like the direction our city's going in. The issues of safety and homelessness and affordability and transportation and on and on. And so I am here tonight to talk to you about the vision of the city that I see and the things that I can do for this city. And so again, thank you for coming out, and please pay attention and tell people to vote.
All right, good advice. We will proceed to these questions now, put together by the League of Women Voters. Candidate Tavel, I'll have you speak first. What is the most pressing issue for District 1?
That's a good question. Well, I would actually say that the most pressing issue for District 1 is right now the most pressing issue for the whole city, and that's dealing with our homelessness crisis. That, the city announced an emergency, but at no point have I seen them act with any urgency. That we spend a tremendous amount of money on homeless service providers that aren't really getting the job done. For anybody here who's ever looked at the All Home website that looks at the region and looks at those 370 service providers that are supposed to be helping people, providing housing, you look at the fact that in 5 of the 5 minimum standards, 5 out of 5, do you know how many of those 370 providers meet that within this region? One. Yet we continue to fund them. And so as I see it, that issue, the issue of homelessness, it's about affordable housing, it's about mental health issues, it's about substance abuse issues, and it goes into public safety issues. And all of those are wrapped together. And when I talk to people in West Seattle, that's what I hear from everybody, that they are concerned about the direction of their whole city, that it's not the city that they remember, and especially the people who have been here for a long time, they don't see a city that they recognize anymore. And that's unfortunately because our leadership in this city has failed to do the things necessary to make it a safe, healthy, productive city. And everybody is losing out. The people who need help, the people who have been here, everybody is losing. And so that is what I think the biggest problem here is, and District 1 knows it.
Thanks very much. Candidate Herbold, same question to you. What is the most pressing issue for District 1?
Absolutely. So I use my time during a campaign to check my reality on what the most important issues are for the district. And so that I'm not just working on the things that I care most about, but that I'm working on the issues that my constituents care most about. And that reality check has demonstrated that the folks in this district, of the things that they talk to me about at the doors most, it is about homelessness. That is a great concern. We are, the data shows we are moving more people out of homelessness into permanent housing more quickly than we ever have before. The issue of our outcomes associated with our human services providers is all related to the fact, 2 things. 1, we're working on transforming a shelter system from basic shelter to enhanced shelter. Basic shelter doesn't work. We have to try something different. Enhanced shelter does. Not only do more people come in from outside for enhanced shelter, but they also leave enhanced shelter for permanent housing more quickly. Enhanced shelter is 24/7, low barrier, can bring your pets, can go with your partners, and full-time access to case management. And you have a place to leave your belongings. Basic shelter, the old system, is mats on the floor. You have to leave in the morning at 7 a.m. You have no place to go, no place to store your belongings, and you have to get back in line at 7 p.m. That is not working. On the throughput side, we need more housing. That's another reason why the outcomes aren't showing what we would like to see from our service providers. We need more affordable housing to serve the population in shelter.
Thank you very much. A related question here, and Candidate Herbold, I'll start with you. Is the city putting enough money towards its homelessness response? If not, where do we get the resources we need?
So, again, I want to reiterate that Candidate and I agree what the greatest challenge is. The thing that I think most separates us, though, is that my opponent believes that simply government efficiencies and public-private partnerships are sufficient to address the great needs around ramping up our enhanced shelter capacity, as well as doubling our investments in permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is the kind of housing that, regardless of whether or not you have mental illness or substance abuse disorder, people who get into permanent supportive housing stay in it. 95% of people who get into permanent supportive housing stay in it. We need to double our investments. The recent McKinstry report said, and these are experts in this field, they said that we need to double our investments in this region to be able to address this problem sufficiently. It's both an input, not enough enhanced shelter, and a throughput problem, not enough affordable housing.
Thank you very much.
Actually,
Please go ahead. Candidate's out. Yes.
jumping the gun, my apologies.
Please do.
Actually, it's kind of funny is the one thing the stranger has said nice about me in this whole campaign process is that when talking about what is the policy difference between the two of us is that I actually got it right. And that's the fact that we may in fact need a lot more money, but we don't know what that amount is yet. And the fact is, until you understand much we're actually spending and what we're getting for that, you don't know what that gap is. And I am not prepared, considering how generous this city is, I am not prepared to just write a blank check and just say we're going to keep throwing money down the hole. Because, you know, the report from McKinsey was only a start of an evaluation of this process. It wasn't a complete report, and it mentioned $410 million that we would need. But again, not enough research was done into where we are and what we're getting. And like I said, what I've found so far is that we spend a tremendous amount of money on the administrative side of the homelessness issue to these providers. And this is what I hear from people working in the city and working with this problem, is that we spend an amazing amount of money on the administrative side, and that money does not go to help the people that need help. We need more housing, we need more services, we need to help people, and we're not doing it. Are we going to need more money? Yes. It looks like we probably will. However, let's find out how much before we keep asking for it. And I don't think it's all going to be solved through public-private partnerships and inefficiencies in the system. But if you don't start there, then you're never going to get it right.
Thanks very much. Candidate Herbold has asked for a 1-minute rebuttal, and Candidate Talbot, you may have a minute to respond to that if you'd like. Candidate Herbold.
Thank you. I think it's really important that people go and read the Stranger article that candidate Talbot references. The Stranger absolutely did not say that he had it right about investment in homelessness services and affordable housing. What they said he had right was identification of the differences between the two campaigns, that I believe we need to invest more and that candidate Talbot does not. I urge you to read it for yourself. That is a quote that is completely taken out of context.
Candidate Talbot.
Well, what I will say is, what I actually said is they said I had it right about the differences between us, that Lisa believes that we just need to spend more, and I believe that we need to figure out how much that is first. What I will say along those lines is that Lisa does also continue to say that the Seattle Times said that she raised the bar in constituent services. The next sentence is also the fact that her politics have done more harm than good. So you got to be careful in what you read, and yes, go out and read the source material and see what people say and see what's reported. But the fact is, on the homelessness issue, we are spending way too much money on the administrative side. And the woman who founded NAMI and the Downtown Emergency Services Center pointed this out, that the only people benefiting right now, it seems, are the ones who are involved in homeless services providing, because the people on the street aren't getting the help. We've had 14 years of the 10-year fight to end homelessness, and it keeps going and it keeps getting worse.
Thank you very much. We're going to stay with this topic, put a face to it, I guess you'd say, talking about the future of Camp Second Chance, the city-endorsed encampment that is down on Myers Way. Candidate Talbot, what do you see as the future of Camp Second Chance?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, right now they're going to be there for another 6 months or so. And I think it's unfortunate they've actually stopped the production line of the really good small houses they were building people, that were getting people out of tough sheds and tents and putting them into a real structure. The fact is, I think there are a lot of things there that are very good. Those are people that are finding hope. You know, they're finding a sense of community. They're finding a pathway to go forward. And in fact, when I was there, you know, they were pretty good stewards for watching crime in the local area, for seeing people that were walking around in the bushes outside of their encampment. And, sorry, encampment, more like I said, a tiny house village. You know, but we need to do obviously more than that. That's not a solution for people, but I actually think a lot of the things that are happening there are good. And tragically, I think a lot of people in the neighborhood around it, unfortunately, see the other fallout from that. The fact that there are people that come there that aren't inside that area, that haven't been positive on the area. And so I remember going to the Highland Park Action Committee and hearing how it was a very split room over the fact that the benefits there for the people who were there at Camp Second Chance, this is good. This is a start of a better way than living in a tent or a car. And the people in the community were concerned that when that camp was put there, they were told that the city was going to do things for them, and the city failed. The city didn't do those things. So hopefully the future of that is that we can provide this good parts of that model and push those things forward.
Candidate Herbold, the future of Camp Second Chance.
Yes, Camp Second Chance is a fantastic model of a tiny house village. It both is a great model of physical configuration, as well as a model of self-management. The city does not fund Camp Second Chance, but it is a sanctioned encampment. And we have an ordinance that limits the number of encampments that the city can sanction and a length of time that those locations can be open and operating. We will have before the council a piece of legislation to expand the total number of encampments, and that could either be tent encampments or tiny house villages. So that would allow the production of tiny houses to continue at Camp Second Chance. This piece of legislation will also consider extending the time frame. So we will have a time and an opportunity to engage with the public about whether or not folks think that's a good idea. I will tell you that of our interventions, the percentage of folks leaving tiny houses and going into shelter or permanent housing is among the highest of our interventions. It's 35% of people are able to move into either shelter or permanent supportive housing. So it is very promising, and that's one of the reasons why we started small with the ordinance that limited the number.
And a 1-minute rebuttal from candidate Talbot. If you want to respond, a minute back to you after that, candidate Herbal.
Yeah, actually, I don't need a minute. I was actually just curious because I know from being there, talking about how it had been in a several month period that a couple of people have moved out, but the 35% is over what period of time?
So the city reports these metrics quarterly, and so on the city's publicly facing, I forget what the term is, the term of art to describe the outcomes, but the website says for every quarter of a reporting period, they give the new percentage. So it shifts from time to time. But right now, the total 2018 numbers, I believe, averaged over each of the 4 quarters, 35%.
So to clarify, so 17 people per quarter?
So this is over all of the sanctioned encampments. The tiny house villages and all of the sanctioned encampments.
All right, thank you very much.
And that is, again, the most successful intervention.
Thank you for the back and forth there. We'll switch gears a little bit here. A question going to you, Councilmember Herbal. We'll start there. Residents in West Seattle are concerned about growing density and the concurrent traffic and parking problems. What options do you support dealing with those issues?
That's a really broad question, but it's one of the issues that I work on an ongoing basis. As I mentioned earlier, I spend a lot of time working to get better bus service for folks who commute by bus. We've been successful in adding service to the Rapid Ride C, the 131, the bus line, the 56 that reaches Admiral, as well as the 120. Because voters voted through the Transportation Benefit District to tax themselves, it allows me as a city official, because we're basically buying extra service from Metro, and allows me as a city official to, again, raise my constituents' voices to get more funding for bus service around those specific lines where there's great need. There are several transportation projects, though, that I'm working on throughout the district. I feel like there's too many to name in a short period of time. Notably working on the Highland Park traffic safety project that will both move more people through the First Avenue, down to the First Avenue Bridge, because people from all over the peninsula go through that area to commute, move those folks more quickly, as well as slow down traffic at other times. Working on a number of safe routes to schools projects throughout the district, and also working on a project down at the Duwamish Longhouse through this budget cycle this year.
Thank you very much. A lot to talk about there. Candidate Talbot, the question to you. Residents in Seattle concerned about growing density, concurrent traffic, and parking problems. What options do you support for dealing with those issues?
Well, I mean, one of the things we have to think about is the fact that if you look at a picture of 100 years ago of what West Seattle looked like, it's a lot different than what it looks like now. And the fact is, we live in an amazing part of the world in an incredible city, and we're going to see people continue to move here, and we are going to get denser, and there are going to be more people. And one of the things we have to do is plan better as a city for that. That the long-term planning, I think, has been pretty inadequate that we've seen in this city. We need need to look at our urban villages, specifically I think the Alaska Junction and Westwood Village, as places where we could have a lot more density because we've got right now the infrastructure around it, especially in terms of mass transit, to handle it. And we have to look at that. And I think instead of looking at these short increments, we have to think what would happen, if another 25,000 people were to end up in District 1. And I don't think we're doing that planning. And you can see it in the fact that with respect to parking, everything, I hear this from people on the doors daily about the fact that they are concerned about, 60-unit buildings coming in with 17 parking spaces, that they're concerned about units, apartment buildings going in with no parking. And in fact, we keep taking away parking for buses and for bike lanes. And you know what? We have to work on those multimodal answers to make the city work. But the thing that's not working, like the owners of Fa Aroma told me the other day, Fa Aroma and Olympic Pizza are losing all of their parking for a bus stop. And they asked whether or not it could be put somewhere else, and they were told no.
Candidate Herbold, you wanted to have a 1-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, just on the issue of planning, I want to make note that I mentioned the 120. The C line and the 120 of Metro's 10 top, through all King County, 10 top routes, the Metro and the 120 are 2 of the top 10. That tells you how many people are going out of West Seattle just on those 2 routes. And so, as it relates specifically to the 120, we're going to a rapid ride model for the 120, and because we're going to the rapid ride model for the 120, I've worked with the Office of Planning and Community Development to get some resources focused on neighborhood planning for that area, precisely because we have to be able to make sure that our planning for density is coinciding with the infrastructure that we're putting in for transportation. So that process will be beginning this year.
Candidate Talbot, would you like to respond? Do you have a minute?
Yeah, just to say that the planning is not adequate. We had a wonderful system set up in this city with neighborhood plans that were created 20, 25 years ago, and those are supposed to be getting updated, and they're not. And the city, in fact, is not choosing to pay attention to those. And that's where the people in a community get to say, hey, we want more bike lanes, we want less bike lanes, we need more bus routes, less bus routes, we're worried about our parking, we're worried about the density. These are the things that are important to us, the goals that we have for our neighborhood. And they're not there, and those protections aren't working. And so what I keep hearing from people on the doors is that SDOT does not do planning very well, and they do not include the thoughts of the people in the community that are going to be the most affected by those plans. That we don't get the same thing from the city. The MHA upzone that was just passed, I think there are plenty of issues with that. And again, this is where I keep hearing over and over and over that we have a city that does not listen to what the communities want, and we need someone who is going to stand up and fight effectively for what we want.
Dovetailing off that issue, Candidate Talbot, I'll stay with you. Many young adults, seniors, workers, and communities of color are no longer able to afford to live in their neighborhoods. We are seeing an increase in gentrification. What are some options for improving housing affordability? What should developers be required to do?
Well, I do think developers need to be required to pay more, and especially, as I just mentioned, with the mandatory housing affordability upzone. If a developer is going to come in and take advantage of the fact that they can now go higher, they can either build affordable units into those developments, or they can kind of take a pass and put money into a pot for developing affordable housing, and they pay this in lieu of fee. And the fact is, I was involved with a group, and we interviewed 36 developers, and of those 36 developers, 36 of them said they will be paying the in lieu of fee, because the square footage charge for that is not high enough for them to be concerned with building the affordable housing in those units, so they'll just pay that fee. They don't have to worry about annual reviews of financial ability to stay in those affordable units. And then what's worse is that money that goes into the pot to be able to build that affordable housing doesn't even have to stay in the neighborhood in which that development happened. The regulations suggest and, say, hopefully, oh, well, it'd be great if that, if that development would stay here, but there's no teeth. There's nothing saying that that development has to go where you just put the development that's not affordable, you need to add the affordable housing, and that needs to happen. And I can tell you, I understand when my landlord came to me in May and showed me his property tax bill going from $3,000 a year to $4,500 a year, it blew my mind. And he told me that had gone up 9%, 8%, 18%, and then 50% over the last 3 years. So we have to look at what we're doing for taxing, and we need to work on this better.
Candidate Herbold, options for improving housing affordability, what should developers be required to do?
Sure. I also just want to, real quickly, there is neighborhood planning that is going to happen for East Westwood, Delridge, and the Junction. We've got neighborhood planning resources devoted to those communities. So one of the things that folks, I want to share with you is that in developing a program like the Mandatory Housing Affordability Program, it's not a static thing. You don't just pass a law and then walk away. You have to implement it, and you have to review it, and you have to analyze the outcomes. And so we put in the program requirements an objective of having 50% of the developers participate with in lieu fees and 50% with performance. The reason why the in lieu fees is important is because for every $1 of a developer's contribution, it leverages $3 more. So the in lieu fees actually buy more affordable housing. We also want to make sure that some developers, 50%, are actually performing on site. And so one of our requirements in holding ourselves accountable to that, meeting that objective, is reviewing the outcomes of this program. We are going to look to see if we're hitting that 50-50 mark. And if we're not, what we'll do is we'll turn up the fee, make the fee more costly to incentivize more performance. And as it relates to how those in lieu dollars are used, we have been noted by a national analyst on inclusionary zoning that Seattle does the best of any other city of investing those dollars in the neighborhoods where they came from.
Thank you very much. A 1-minute rebuttal, candidate Tavel.
So
I have a chance to respond.
Oh, thank you. So when the MHA legislation was being discussed at City Council, I know that actually Councilmember Herbold sent an email out saying that if we are not seeing 50-50 inclusion with respect to building affordable housing, that we need to change that. And now, we're hearing that there is a time period where we're going to look at that, and I believe that time period is 2 years. And so how much development can start in a 2-year period before we understand that the in lieu of fees are too low and they're not going to give us the affordable housing we need? The City Council knows fair well from the neighborhood groups that showed them that 36 of those 36 developers said, no way, there's no reason to build the affordable housing. The in lieu of fee is low enough that we'll just pay it. It's just a cost of doing business. We don't deserve to be the recipient of a cost of doing business. We need affordable housing, and we need it to go hand in hand with the development and the upzoning and the densification that we're getting in our neighborhoods, because that's the only way that people are going to be able to live here.
Candidate Herbold, you have a minute to respond.
I think it's actually July of 2020 that we're supposed to analyze the outcomes of the program, but I'm happy to check on that.
Okay, thanks very much. We're moving on. The Seattle Climate Plan includes reaching zero net greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. What are 2 to 3 specific things the city can do in the next 4 years to set us on a path to meet the goal or even speed it up? Candidate Herbold, I'll start with you.
Sure. So in addition to the objectives of the Green New Deal, I have been working to move towards electrification of vehicles that the city relies on. So we are now the second city in the nation to have some of our garbage and recycling fleet be electrified vehicles, and I want to expand that. I also am working to look at making requirements for more recycling by changing the construction code for multifamily buildings so that there's recycling, compost, and garbage on every floor. One of the greatest indicators of people's agreement to recycling is being able to access it, and one of the greatest shortcomings we have in people recycling is folks who do live in multifamily buildings that have to schlep their garbage down to, or the recycling to different places. So we need to make changes in the construction code to address that. I'm also working with the port and have worked with the port to require electrification of the ships that will be going into Terminal 5. 70% of Seattle's emissions is related to transportation, so doing so is really important. And I'm also really feel very strongly we need to renew our transportation benefit district so we can continue buying more bus service.
Thank you. Candidate Tavel, we're talking about 2 to 3 things the city can do in the next 4 years to set us on this path with the Seattle Climate Plan, meeting that goal or even speeding it up possibly.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is we've got to work to speed that up. I mean, if you understand what's happening with the climate in our planet, we are no longer in a period where we're seeing what can we do to change this? What can we do to change our trajectory? Right now, I hate to say it, but we are in a damage control period, and we need to start thinking that way. Going carbon neutral within 30 years is way too far out. And the fact is, we don't talk enough about those issues. We don't talk about the issues of fresh water. We don't talk about the issues of being truly environmentally conscious, which means stating that if you're going to build new buildings, make it mandatory that you have to follow those green building codes. If we're going to make a change and we're going to see a difference at all, we're going to have to be tough about it. And the fact is, yes, going to electric fleets is something important. I know it's interesting as I've raised the point about police cars and going to police cruisers that are either hybrid or electric, but there are issues with the fact that there's so much equipment in them that they can't necessarily just run off electric. So let's look at it. We've got engineers in this town. We can go talk to Tesla about what they could do. You know, the fact is, I think with environmental change, we need to start thinking outside of the box. And what we need to do is we need to look to the experts at the University of Washington. We need to look at the companies around here in the city of Seattle that have been studying this problem for decades and have some amazing ideas. And we need to reach out to them and tell us what are those ideas and what can we do to make this better.
Thank you very much. Moving along, Candidate Tavel, I'll stay with you. The mayor has recently proposed her 2019-2020 budget. What changes would you recommend? What items do you applaud?
That's a very good question. I do like the fact that they are now talking about something I've been talking about for a while, which is a transitional program for people that are homeless coming out of jail so that we can start working on that cycle of people commit crime, go to jail, live on the street, back out of the street, back to that same place where they don't have community help, they don't have support, they don't have that basic network that can help change that cycle and change that path. I worry about, again, some of the spending that is on the homeless service providers in this city, whether it's on housing or on mental health services or substance abuse services, that don't look at what we've gotten for that money, and that it continues to put money to providers that haven't done a good job. And so, again, the same thing I keep hearing from a lot of people on the streets is, you know, SDOT and City Light and public utilities, that we are not looking at how they're managing their projects, we're not looking at how their money is spent, that the budget just sort of keeps moving. And, you know, it's that idea. Anybody that's been in a big enough company with a budget and they have money left over, and then someone above them tells them, look, spend the money, because if you don't spend it now, we're not going to get it in the next budget cycle. And I think we need to do more about asking, where do we need to save money? Where can we save money? And I know Mayor Durkin actually put that challenge out to all the departments to come up with 10% that they could set aside for when the economy turns. And that's something that we need to do.
Thank you. Candidate Herbold, talking about the mayor's budget, changes you recommend, items you applaud.
Sure. So some of the things that I'm really pleased to see in the mayor's budget, consistent with what I mentioned earlier about the need to double our investments in permanent supportive housing. Thanks to the generosity of the voters, we have housing levy dollars that go out every year, and those dollars go out in a competitive bid with our nonprofit housing providers who apply to build housing, and they build hundreds of units of housing every year. This year, we are going to be able to double our investments in permanent supportive housing because of our ability to add more funds in addition to our housing levy funds from the taxpayers. These funds are from two sources. One is from our ability to use our bond capacity to fund housing, and the other is from the transportation network, the TNCs. I'm forgetting what the meaning of that acronym is, but it's basically the tax on Lyft and Uber that the council is considering, and many of those dollars are going to go to affordable housing as well. As far as what I would like to change, I don't support continual funding of the downtown streetcar. I think those dollars would be better put aside and used, allocated, earmarked for third-party funding for sound transit.
Thank you very much. Transportation network companies. But
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping it short there. I know there's limited time we're talking about here. Candidate Herbold, I'll stay with you for this question, please. Property taxes are going up primarily because voters are asked to support levies for basic governmental services, such as parks, libraries, and street maintenance. Why can't these items be funded in the regular budget?
So Seattle and Washington State in general has the most regressive taxation structure in the nation. That means that the people with the smallest incomes pay the highest percentage of those incomes towards taxes, and the people with the highest incomes pay the smallest percentage of their incomes. And that creates a situation where the cost of providing city services is rising at a rate that is higher than the revenue coming in to support it. And so that's why we rely on property tax levies. I am really excited that a income tax on the affluent that I led the council in passing is working its way through the courts. And we got a good ruling at the State Court of Appeals. It's going to be heard in the State Supreme Court challenging a 5-4 decision from the 30s. And if this passes, my first commitment, and it's in the legislation, is to dial down our reliance on the property tax and on the sales tax. We can be like Oregon, a state that has no sales tax. If we leave, we're one of only 7 states in the nation that don't have an income tax, and so we can move away from this reliance on tax forms that are I'm losing my word now, but that are unfair, basically, and move towards a more equitable system if we're successful at the state Supreme Court.
Thank you very much. That question, Candidate Tavel, was in regards to funding items in the regular budget rather than using levies to support them.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you can talk about regressive taxes, the need for an income tax, or the fact is, you could talk about the fact that our city government manages our budget poorly, and the fact that they do not marshal our resources very well, and the fact that it's $6 billion a year. I find it hard to believe, and I believe a whole lot of people around the city find it hard to believe that we cannot marshal those resources in a way that lets us take care of our city properly. I have always been stunned at the generosity of the people in the city to step up on a new levy for transportation, for schools, for healthcare, for childcare, for all of these different things. And the other day, someone said something to me that I thought was perfect, and they said they feel like the city has squandered our generosity. And I feel that way too. And you know what? In business school, they talk about the fact that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And we're failing to measure properly what we're doing, and especially, as I've gone back to a bunch of times, the homeless service providers. That is a whole lot of money that we are failing to manage and failing to measure. And so we need a better understanding of what it is we're doing. When you look at the cost of some of the transportation projects that seem to annoy 10 times more people than they actually help, when you look at the fact that every time they go to a levy and tell us how it's spent, within months we're told that they don't have enough, that they misplanned it. And I'm sick of that. We are a smart, intelligent city that has people that are willing to continually give, but now it is time for the city to give back and manage its resources properly.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question here. And Candidate Herbold, how about I start with you here? With the federal government increasingly reducing support for immigrants, what can our city do to support immigrants and refugees in the community? How can we make a difference? And if you could add, do you support Seattle being a sanctuary city?
So I was fortunate enough to be able to work with our now Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal the weekend after 9/11 in her call to name Seattle a hate-free zone. And she created the organization called Hate Free Zone, and we quickly worked together to pass legislation. It's not an intent resolution. It is the law of our city that we in this city do not inquire about people's immigration status, whether or not we're providing police services to a community or whether or not we are providing social services help to a community. The reason why we moved to do that is actually to make communities safer. We rely on people to report crimes in their neighborhoods. Somebody who is an immigrant is worried about their immigration status is is not going to come forward and report a crime that either they've been a victim of or that they've witnessed. And so we had the support of then Police Chief Gil Kurlikowski. We were the first city in the nation to pass this law after 9/11, and it's been replicated in cities all across the country. One of the greatest values of the residents of the city of Seattle is that we believe in taking care of one another. We believe in caring for our neighbors because we know it makes us stronger as a community.
Thank you very much. Candidate Talbot, what can our city do to support immigrants and refugees? How can we make a difference? Do you support Seattle being a sanctuary city?
So I do support Seattle being a sanctuary city, and what I will say about that is that the people who are immigrants in our community that have been productive in this community and who have given back to this community deserve that protection. But what I will tell you as a public defender, and many people have asked me about the same thing with the sanctuary city, they say, well, how could you possibly say that it's okay for criminals to stay here? I don't support that. If you are a felon, if you are on warrant status, and you are an immigrant, because you have violated the laws or you have not done what you were supposed to or asked by the court, I have no issues with the fact that those people we do not afford the same protection to them. I have fought for those people for 15 years, so what I can tell you is to protect the members of our society that are responsible, that are careful, and that respect the fact that they're here, those are the people that we should protect. Now, we have Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project, which is a fantastic group that does incredible help helping people. And I think we need also to continue to do more actually supporting the cultural diversity in this city. I know I've heard from a lot of the immigrant communities that they want to assimilate, they want to become part of Seattle, they want to become part of America, but they don't want to necessarily lose their culture in the process. And so I think to that end, we can do a lot to support those communities to uplift what their certain cultures are without necessarily letting it disappear. But in general, I support helping those people that want to be a helpful part of our community.
Thank you very much for that. I wanted to make sure I looked out in the audience. If you do have a question you'd like to ask the candidates, we're going to do that in just a little bit. If you have one of those cards, please raise up your hand, and one of our volunteers will collect that from you. Candidate Talbot, I'll go back to you for this question. We know there is a national opioid crisis that touches our local communities. What can be done to help those with drug addictions? How can we get access to more detox services? And do you support having safe injection sites in the city?
So I'll start with the fact that I do not support the safe injection sites. I do not believe that they are the answer. Harm reduction absolutely needs to be part of our response to the opioid crisis. That there are long-term abusers who do need things like that, but that is not in a safe injection site. It is not putting it in a neighborhood where people go there to do it. And I've said this many times, that when you look at the proposal the city has put forth, they actually talk about those sites allowing people between the ages of 15 and 69 to access those sites. And the first thing that hits me is how, as a city, could we possibly say that it's okay for someone 15 years old to be doing that? That is not helping anybody. Now, when it comes to the opioid crisis in general, we need to increase our community-based detox programs because for the most part, Washington is a medical model state. And we need to increase the fact that one of the things that's going to help us is by people who have gone through this process, who have found their way out of that crisis, and who have found their way beyond that illness to a place where they are healthier to help the next group. You know, the American Medical Association is creating a certification program so that people who have been through that opioid crisis firsthand, they can then go help that next group out. And that's going to be increasing the number of community-based support housing across this city, because this is not something we're going to get out of quickly. It's going to rely on the people that the first wave that have come out can help that next wave and on.
Thanks very much. Candidate Herbold talking about the opioid crisis, getting more access to detox services, and the possibility of having a safe injection site.
Absolutely agree that we need access to more community-based detox facilities as well as programmatic resources. I also support the fact that the city has provided funding for opioid replacement therapy. So folks understand the area of drug treatment is not one that typically, it's not a lane that the city typically moves in. It's usually the responsibility of the state and King County. King County because they have public health, and the state because they have responsibilities of the drug use. And so our state legislature has really made some game-changing investments in this last budget to both fund more facilities, inpatient treatment facilities, as well as the programs necessary to support them. And so we're going to be seeing those come online, and they're critically important to have places for people to go. As it relates specifically to, I don't call it a safe injection site, I called it an overdose prevention site. I don't think you can both say that you support harm reduction and that you don't support a overdose prevention site. Harm reduction means you are providing somebody with the resources that will allow them to avoid hurting themselves or dying. And in this case, that's the function that these facilities serve.
Thank you very much. Candidate Tabel, you'd like a minute to respond?
Yeah, I just want to say that you can have harm reduction as part of the response to the opioid crisis without creating a safe injection site. I recently met with a couple of representatives from up in Vancouver who came down to talk, and they wanted to find out about drug courts and about the law enforcement assisted diversion and what we thought about the idea of safe injection sites. And what I heard from them is what they've seen is that the people who are going there, the site doesn't provide the drugs. So they buy drugs from drug dealers. And they frequently, on their way to that site, unfortunately, will steal things to pay for the drugs that they buy to do in the safe injection site. This is not a cycle we should be supporting as a city, period. Understanding that harm reduction has to be part of it for the people who are long-term addicted, that we are not just going to turn this around overnight, but it is not in a safe injection site.
Candidate Herbold, if you'd like to respond.
Sure. I would just like to say that many of us have people that we love and care about. And one of the things that folks talk about a lot are the resources that are saved by safe injection sites. There are a lot of public dollars that are saved by not having to respond to an emergency on the street. And I would just say that the resources that we save, we could save with safe injection sites pales to the value of having somebody that you care about who doesn't die. I have people that I care about whose lives have been saved just because there was somebody else in the room when they OD'd. That's the function that a safe injection site provides.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on. Just because of the format of this, I know there's a lot more to talk about there. I'm going to move on to this next question. Candidate Tabel, I'll start with you. The prison system is broken in this country. The question says, do you support local restorative justice initiatives? How would you improve reintegration for former offenders?
I mean, look, being a public defender for the last 15 years, these are the clients that I've dealt with, and I think we need to do much better about reintegrating them into society. You've got an interesting pocket. I mean, look, our criminal justice system has tremendous problems, and the prison system in this country is very much a biased system that needs reformation. Here, though, some of the things we can do is we really can look at when someone comes out of prison to be able to provide them with the support that allows them to go down the path that they want to choose. That I've had lots of clients who have come out of prison without any support system, without any idea of where they're going to go, and that ends up leading to tremendous problems. And for those people that have decided they want to turn their life around and that they've paid for their crime to the people of this state, we need to provide better help, which is why one of those things I want to do is a transitional housing program that when you get out of jail, if you're still homeless, we will attach you to those wraparound services that give you the community, the help, and the support to move on. We also need to understand that unfortunately there are long-term, criminals that just will keep going back to it. And we need to be able to separate those out because on the one hand, we are failing utterly to help those people that want to change their life because we're not putting enough time and effort into giving them a pathway. And then we're going to have to figure out what do you do to the people who come out and just recommit. So I believe in rehabilitation, and I think we got to be careful about it.
Candidate Herbold, talking about local restorative justice initiatives and improving reintegration for former offenders, how do you do it?
So the state's got a fantastic program. It's called the Certificate of Restoration Program. It allows folks to, after leaving the criminal justice system, to demonstrate that they should basically be given a green light for housing and for jobs. And one of the greatest indicators, if not the greatest indicator for recidivism is housing. Recidivism reduces by 70% if you provide somebody who's left the criminal justice system with housing. And so we have great programs like Pioneer Human Services that provides transitional housing for the offender population. And we need to do more to support those programs. It's a very successful model, and it's one of those models that we don't need to create. It exists, but we need to fund it to a greater extent.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to the next question. Candidate Herbold, I'll go back to you. Hunger is an issue in our schools, in our wider community. What can be done to improve access to food and nutrition? What would you do about the Delridge food desert, as it's called here?
So yes, hunger is it's a growing problem for not just the entire city, but also for West Seattle. We do have food deserts, 2 of them here in District 1. The city is moving away from focusing so much on making sure that there are stores in food deserts, but looking at other ways to increase access to healthy foods. So that's why we've increased funding for programs like the Fresh Bucks program. We are also figuring out ways to partner with our pea patches to allow them ways of getting food to populations of people throughout the city and in particular in District 1. As it relates specifically to the needs in our schools, I think there are ways for the city to partner with the schools. The responsibilities of the school district are primarily with that government and with the funding source that funds that government. But we have a Families and Ed program that, again, the taxpayers contribute to that can enhance services associated with getting kids ready to learn. And there's no doubt that making sure that kids do not have an empty stomach when they come to school is a critical component in getting them ready to learn.
Thank you very much. Candidate Tavel talking about food deserts in the Delridge area. What can be done to improve access to food and nutrition?
So one of the things I'd love to see happen is I would love to see better food education done in schools. It's funny, is I've had a couple of friends recently who were diagnosed as diabetics, and they found out at the hospitals that they really have very little understanding of true nutrition and how to help people eat more effectively and healthier. And the fact is, in schools, this is the place where we have to teach it. We have to teach it, we have to have it, we have to have access to good, fresh food, and we need to be able to instill in our students this idea of how do you eat healthy, how do you eat for a good body, a good mind, and we should be providing that in schools. We're not doing a good enough job, and I think we need to work with the school districts to help improve that. Now, second to that is the food desert in Delridge, and I would say there is a very easy thing we can do because the groundbreaking ceremony for the new food co-op is coming on November 2nd. In fact, I doorbelled the treasurer of the board the other day, and it was awesome. He thanked me for the fact that I had just joined up. And so I spent my $100 to join the food co-op, and what I can say is one of the things we can all do as a community is join it. Join it, give them the $100. That's the way that we're going to increase their ability to provide food. And, the way a food desert, just so people know, is defined is a 1/2 to 1 mile distance within an urban area to not having a grocery store. And there's a 2.5-mile swath that runs right through that area in Delridge. And what's interesting is talking to a lot of grocery stores, they don't go there for a lot of economic reasons.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. More to talk about. Here are some good questions coming in from the Seattle Human Services Coalition. I wanted to pass along this one. Candidate Tavel, I'll start with you. Seattle and King County are in the midst of a child care crisis because child care is expensive and unaffordable for many working families. At the same time, some child care providers cannot afford to pay workers a living wage and stay in business. What ideas do you have for solutions?
That's good. That's actually not one I've been asked yet. I certainly agree with the issue after having gone through child care issues myself. One of the things I know I found and our family found was that the co-op preschools are a really fantastic model where you've got teachers and the parents taking part of that. So it relieves some of the financial burden on the location because the parents are coming in and doing some of that. We do need to expand that. I actually think one of the things in general is we need to expand our use of our schools. That, we've got a lot of space in these schools that go unutilized, in the early hours, because I know a lot of times people I talk to on the doors, they need childcare before their school is open for their kids. So what do? And especially nowadays, when we've got such affordability issues in our city, people need that ability to work. They need ability to have the time to go to work and come home from work and not stress about how much is going to go into childcare. And it is staggering how much that is. So I think the city, we obviously had the levy that came up for childcare, which is wonderful. That is a start. And again, this is where if we manage our resources better, maybe there would be a few $1 million out there that we could put towards childcare. But I think the first thing is really, it's recognizing the fact that the childcare facilities have a hard time being able to pay and keep good health and be able to handle the number of children they have. But we just need to keep our eyes open for how do we change that model to care for more children. Because really, childcare should be something this city could provide so that people can work and can raise their family without those issues.
Thank you. Candidate Herbold talking about the child care crisis. It's expensive, unaffordable for some families, and some providers cannot afford to pay workers a living wage. Ideas for solutions.
So it's not true that there's a lot of extra space in our schools to provide childcare. I actually champion funding for the schools in District 1 that were being squeezed out. Their childcare facilities, the Boys and Girls Club and the lunch programs were getting squeezed out because the state was working to reduce the class size, which means they need more classes and they need more space. Similarly, our community centers, Alki and Hiawatha in particular, are bursting at the seams with their use of those centers as childcare facilities, so much so that they aren't able to use the community centers for other non-childcare purposes as much as they would like to. And so really, I think a big part of this equation is about space. And the city has an incentive zoning program where we provide incentives to developers to include childcare space in their building, and we need to revisit that and see what we can do to strengthen the outcomes associated with providing this space in these buildings. I think it's a crucial part of the affordability piece. Similarly, as it relates to being able to make sure that childcare providers are able to pay their staff, we should look at what we've just recently done with the human services providers in requiring in our contracts cost of living increases that are commensurate with the change in the cost of living.
Thank you very much for that. Candidate Tavel, you had a brief rebuttal you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not talking about space in school during school hours. I'm talking about the fact that we actually should look at activating our schools before those hours and after those hours, because I think we actually could do a lot more. And so
these are before and after school programs that I was referring to.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to some of the different questions from the audience here, and thank you for turning these in. Very much appreciated. To the candidates, I would like for this to stay to 1 minute for your responses so I can get to as many as possible here. And I'm going to say, let's cool it on the rebuttals here. Let's just go, let's go to lightning mode here, if you want to call it that, if 1 minute is actually lightning mode. This question is addressed to candidate Tavel, but I feel like both candidates should answer it. Bit of an existential question here, perhaps. How will my life change if you become my city council member? Candidate Tavel, please hold your applause. Thank you.
You will start to rebuild your trust in our city government. You will start to respect the city council that we have, because you will find you will have a city council member who has an office in District 1, not just 45 hours of district time over the course of an entire calendar year, but every day. You will find that you will have a council member that will listen to you regardless of what your philosophical bent is on politics, that because we are supposed to represent everybody in the community. So the thing that will change is you will find that you will be listened to, but you will be heard, and that I will be the one that will actually stand up and take your words to the city, that when most of the people in the community stand up and say, we don't like this thing, you will have someone fighting for you. And when everybody in the community or the majority of the community is saying, we do want this thing, you'll have someone fighting for you. So your life will change very quickly and very positively to the fact that you will see and interact with your council member all the time.
Councilmember Herbold, how will my life change if you become my city council member?
So there are at least 4 new seats wants somebody who knows how City Hall works. It is going to be more critical than any other time in probably our city's history to have somebody who understands how the city works when we have this massive change in representation at City Hall. We're going to have new people. It's going to be helpful to our district and to people in our district and to your priorities to have somebody who has experience when there are going to be so many other folks on the council who don't have experience. And I think that's going to be a really positive change for representation in District 1.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Herbold, Candidate Herbold, I have a question directed right to you. How can the council seriously ban plastic straws but approve needles for self-injection?
So the council, even though it's only gone into effect in the last year, the city council banned plastic straws in legislation that was passed in 2010. It just had a 8-year phase-in period. We first started with bags, and then later with styrofoam containers. There were a number of products that the city was working with businesses on taking out of our waste stream. Again, straws just started last year. We do not approve of needles, but we do have a really wonderful and robust needle pickup program that SPU, the department that I oversee, runs. And if you call in a needle that you see on public property, they'll come and they'll pick it up within 24 hours.
Thank you very much for that. Candidate Tavel, a question directed to you. It's great that all of these people are here, but we are not a representative demographic of all people in this community. How are you able to understand and meet needs of everyone, given the changes that you have referenced? That's the question.
Well, because I actually go around to all of the different neighborhoods of District 1, West Seattle and South Park, and that's Alki and Highland Park and High Point and Delridge and Arbor Heights and Alki Beach, and I talk to those people. You know, at Neighborhood House, we're talking about doing a forum that would involve the mothers talking to us about the issues they're having with their teenage children, not paying attention to them and losing touch with their culture and getting involved in crime. And so bringing out to them a police officer and a prosecutor and myself being a defense attorney and talking to them about going down to South Park and talking to the Latino community, the Vietnamese community, and having friends in all of those communities who can help me understand and bring me to households where groups can talk to me. I mean, the fact is, what I've done on the Morgan Community Association, what I've done with Allied Arts and Seattle Green Spaces Coalition, lets me go out and talk to people all over the place. And the one thing I can tell you is I listen to them.
Thank you very much. Candidate Herbold, would you like to speak to that issue? It feels like a general piece there with regard to the fact that they're idea of representing everyone, not just the people we're looking at here tonight.
Sure. I would urge folks to take a look at the Seattle Times voter analysis of the primary, and it showed my strong support in low-income communities of color east of 35th and in South Park, because I do spend, I believe that our city is focused on equity, and equity isn't equal. Equity is spending your time focusing on the greatest needs of people with the least first. And that's the work I'm doing. That's why I've worked to get funding for programs at Neighborhood Health, the Ready to Work program that teaches folks how to both attain literacy skills as well as apply for jobs, citizenship program, funding for child care programs for at-risk youth in South Park, funding for criminal justice and crime prevention coordinator in South Park. I'm focusing my efforts on the areas of the city where people have the least.
Thank you. And I'll address this to both the candidates here. Candidate Herbold, I'll start with you. What is your position on RV residents, and how do we, or the city, keep their black water from going in the sewers?
So I spearheaded a program with Seattle Public Utilities called the RV Remediation Program. It started out as a pilot, and we're working on doubling it in this budget cycle. At any given time, there are over 400 RV locations throughout the city. And just like anything else that the city does, we have to prioritize the locations remediation program currently allows the city to focus on 8 locations throughout the city, and it's not based on how many people call and complain. It's based on an objective assessment of things like the public health impacts of that location. And SPD works with Seattle Public Utilities to require the RV dwellers to move on and clean up the area. 8 locations every month. We're working on doubling the funding for that program so that they can do 16 locations a month through the budget process this year.
Thank you. I know we're speeding things up, talking about RV residents there.
I know whatever we're doing is not working, and I know whatever we're doing right now is still angering a lot of people in our community and people all around the city. And from what I see, there are 2 important things we need to do. One is we need to enable the police of the city to enforce the laws of the city, quite simply. The second thing is we actually need to look at safe lots where people can park, where you can safely pump out waste, where you can safely recycle and throw your garbage out, where it doesn't become something on the side of the road or in the middle of a community where you're forcing people in that community to deal with it. You know, as we've said, we're in a crisis right now. We're in a crisis about homelessness, and part of that is with RVs and campers and those things, and we need to find ways to be a city that enforces the law, because you have to do that. If you don't do that, it falls apart. But you've got to find more effective ways to help the people who are in that situation where they're living in an RV or in a camper or in their car, because that's not the thing that's good for anybody.
Thank you very much. We have a question from a 9-year-old and 12-year-old in the audience. I guess if you added up their ages, they could actually vote. But maybe I'll start with you, candidate Tavel, on this one. How do you plan to improve dog parks in West Seattle is the question.
So this is actually a great one that I've gotten multiple times on the doors about the fact that we need to add one. And I think it's quite true. And I will tell you, from knocking thousands and thousands of doors, that a whole lot of people have dogs in this city. In fact, I've realized that if I could literally learn to communicate with dogs, I think I would win this election very easily. But the fact is, we need to add a dog park here. So we need to take a look, whether it's, you know, taking space from a current park or adding a new space. I'm not sure what it is. It's something that my team and I are going to look into, but we will definitely be adding a dog park.
Candidate Herbold.
Dog parks are a winning issue in this city. There used to be an organization called Citizens for Off-Leash Areas, and man, they made the decisions about who got elected because they were such a powerful lobbying group. They haven't been as active in recent years, but yeah, there's a really strong constituency for off-leash areas. The trick is finding land, and so that's an area where we can look at both city land. I wouldn't want to take it from existing parkland, but there are other city properties that aren't currently in use as parkland that we can look at using. And actually, the good news is that the Parks Department is working on this. And if those kids want to get in touch with me, I can get you some information about the locations that they're considering here in West Seattle.
Thank you very much for that. Question to both candidates one more time. Candidate Herbold, I will start with you. As a city council member, how will you work to both support the Seattle Police Department and also hold them accountable?
Yeah, constitutional policing in the city, as well as adequate staffing for our police department, are 2 really important parts of a safe city, and they're not mutually incompatible. What I do to demonstrate my support for our police department is to approve the budget and approve programs associated with increasing staffing. So I approved legislation that allows for a $10,000 hiring bonus for new officers and officers coming over for a lateral hire. And then we're looking at a retention program in the budget this year as well. I have increased the budget for the police department from $300 million to $400 million in just the 3 years that I've been on the council. That is the largest increase over that period of time ever. And I approved the SPOG contract, the police officers contract, that made our police officers the most highly paid police officers in the state.
Thank you.
But we also have to pay attention to police accountability and getting the department out from under the consent decree.
Thank you. Talking about holding the SPD accountable and supporting them, candidate Tavel.
So last Wednesday, we were at a SPOG-sponsored public safety forum, And afterwards, when I was talking to several officers, the one thing they said is if they had a choice between earning $2 or getting $1 and a pat on the back for a good job, they'd take the dollar and the pat on the back for a good job. Morale is not just about salary. You know, sponsoring a contract and supporting it and voting for it reluctantly is not support. And you know what? The police of this city do not feel supported. They don't feel like they're supported by council at all. Sitting on the Southwest Precinct Advisory Committee, I've been able to talk to almost every officer that's in the Southwest Precinct, and not a single one has told me anything different other than morale is low, they don't feel supported, they don't feel like they get to do their job. And yeah, being under the consent decree is a big part of it, and the fact is, that's where we're going to achieve our accountability, and we need meaningful accountability, which is when a police officer violates their object to protect and serve us, that they face real consequences.
Thank you. Candidate Herbold, I'll start with you here. Both candidates, I'm trying to jam in as many questions as I can here. This one's a bit of a double dip. Candidate Herbold, should the sweet beverage tax revenue be repurposed? What about school zone camera revenues? Yeah, two big ones. Try it in a minute.
Yeah. So I don't think that the sweet beverage tax revenue should be repurposed. I actually voted against the tax, but I support the use of the revenue associated with the tax for programs that directly improve health outcomes. On the speed zone camera revenue, absolutely. Best practices show that if we are going to use automated ticketing as a way to improve safety outcomes, we need to use that revenue for pedestrian and traffic safety programs. People feel less resentful. They're national best practices. People feel less resentful for that as an enforcement mechanism if they know the revenue associated with it is going back into transportation safety projects, not just into the general revenue fund. And so I have been actually a champion on trying to earmark more of those funds specifically for safe routes to schools programs.
Thank you very much. Candidate Tavel, sweet beverage tax revenue, school zone camera revenue.
Well, I definitely wouldn't repurpose the sweet beverage tax revenue. I would just rescind the sweet beverage tax. It is horribly regressive, and if anybody looks at the communities that have been hurt the most by it, it is a tremendously regressive tax. And the fact that the city council actually argued that sugary beverages are somehow worse for you on a biological level than diet sodas is absurd. It's ridiculous. And the fact that they call coffee drinks milk drinks so they don't get taxed, you gotta be kidding. So, and so because of that, we need to fight for taxes that are not regressive. And so, if you want to put a tax on all beverages and use that, fine. One of my other issues is the fact that, look what happened to the business license fee. We were supposed to use that on police officers. We didn't get it. We have a marijuana. We're selling legal marijuana. We're getting taxes. Where is that going? And so one of the things I would say with any tax about repurposing, make sure we know where it's going first.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to sneak in a couple more questions before the final statements here. Candidate Tavel, I'll start with you. Actual car speeds, particularly on main arterials such as 35th Ave and Fauntleroy, are often much higher than posted speeds. What suggestions would you have for addressing and remedying this situation?
Well, certainly, talking to members of the Southwest Precinct, this is something where the police could actually have increased patrols to hopefully slow that down. You sometimes, I know down on Beach Drive, they took away the speed bumps and then they put the speed bumps back. And I know in a lot of neighborhoods, that's actually one of probably the top 5 things I get said, hey, we need speed bumps on this street. And those do work. When I see someone flying down the street at 50, 60 miles an hour when it's supposed to be 20 or 30, you see them hit a speed bump, you realize that's going to impact them, and that's going to change things. So between better enforcement, possibly adding more speeding cameras, we can certainly generate revenue from those. And also, I actually think we need to put more into education in general about driving in this city. That's one of the things I've noticed is we have issues. We have issues with merging. We have issues with speeding, and it would be nice to actually see a program and maybe a set of commercials like they did with the tunnel about telling people how to drive better and more responsibly.
Right. We're going some big issues there, Candidate Tavel. Thank you very much. Candidate Herbold, talking about car speeds, 35th Avenue, Fauntleroy, suggestions you'd have for addressing and remedying that situation.
Well, I think signage is really important. I think the speed limit that is enforced signage, and that's an issue. When we reduce the speed limits on arterials, we haven't replaced all the signs to be consistent. I think that's incredibly important. But also, I agree with Candidate Tavel. There are traffic safety programs that we need to raise our voice and make sure that SDOT is identifying the highest priority locations and speed bumps. When I talk about constituent services, speed bumps are one of the things that I go to bat for communities, including the specific speed bumps on Beach Drive mentioned by Candidate Tavel.
Thank you. We'll have one more question here before closing statements, please. Candidate Herbold, I'll start with you. How do you feel about setting up FEMA-style housing and requiring people to live there? I believe we're talking about the homeless crisis here, until more permanent housing is built.
So this is something that I am really interested in learning more about. The city auditor, I commissioned a city audit of our navigation team. The navigation team are the folks who go out and prioritize outdoor encampments for removal. A lot of people think the city's not doing anything about outdoor encampments. I get the reports every week. Between 6 and 12 outdoor encampments are removed every week. But again, it's not who's calling the most. The largest number of calls, it's about prioritizing the locations that the city acts based on health and safety criteria. And so that audit that I did of the navigation teams actually identified this as something that we should take a look at. I need to learn more about it. This is something that we identified, myself and Councilmember Mosqueda identified during the budget process. It's something that we should learn more about. I didn't get the support, Councilmember Mosqueda didn't get the support during the budget process, but we're going to be bringing it up again this year.
Candidate Tavel talking about setting up FEMA-style housing for the homeless, requiring people to live there until more permanent housing is built.
Well, I would say that Brendan Colding was the first one that started bringing up FEMA-style tents early on in this campaign. And unfortunately, he received a lot of heat for the fact that you really shouldn't invoke the name of FEMA for something that you want to do. But the fact is, all of a sudden, it's regained some life. And Sattler's been talking about this. And the truth is, we actually do need a way to triage people that are living on the side of the road and living in parks. And so setting up a place where they could actually go that was healthier, that was more productive, I think you've got a chance to be able to potentially help them. But it's not a solution. What would scare me is that you put that in place and all of a sudden you think you've solved the problem. And that isn't. And it could be way too much money to spend just to start trying to figure out how to get people to real permanent housing. And so, like I said, from a standpoint of moving things in the right direction, fine, but I would be scared, especially the way this city has handled things in the past, that this would end up being the stopping place, and that can't happen.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for turning in all these different questions. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them. It is closing statement time, just so we can try to remain fair here. Candidate Herbold, I'll have you go first, and Candidate Tavel, you can have the last word. Please, Candidate Herbold.
Fantastic. So, as I mentioned earlier, I use the campaign process as a way both of holding myself accountable for the promises that I made in 2015. I ran on a platform of better laws for workers, better laws for renters. As it relates specifically to better laws for workers, we passed secure scheduling legislation. When we passed it, this is legislation that requires large employers of retail and chain restaurants to let their employees know of their schedules in 2 weeks in advance. It's being replicated all over the country now. This is fantastic legislation. It's an example of Seattle leading the way for the rest of the nation. I want to do more of that work, and because I am supported by folks who also see the city of Seattle as being a change maker. We don't wait for the state, we don't wait for the federal government to pass policies that improve the lives of residents in our Seattle. We lead the way. And I'm supported by the 34th District Democrats, the 11th District Democrats, the King County Democrats, MLK Labor, a whole bunch of other labor unions that they're members of, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, King County Councilmember Joe McDermott, City of Seattle Councilmember Lorena Gonzalez. And I'm also supported by organizations like the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, the National Women's Political Caucus, Planned Parenthood, the Washington Conservation Voters. People agree that we need to make sure that we have progressive representation on the city council. There's a lot of independent expenditure money in this campaign. There are folks who want to buy this election and want to make sure that the city isn't moving us forward in a progressive way, in a way that not only benefits the residents of our city, but puts forward a positive vision for other cities throughout the country. I want your support. I hope I can get your support to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you very much, Candidate Tavel. You'll have the last word. I understand there are other questions here. We're trying to keep it to the format we had with the written questions. Thank you for that. The candidates will be here. The candidates will be here afterwards to answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming out tonight. This is an incredibly important election. This is an election about change. 4 of the council members have decided that they're not running again because they are part of the problem and we need to change it. What I will say is make sure when you leave here, tell people to vote. Tell everybody you know to vote and tell them to tell everybody that they know to vote because that's important. The fact is, when you vote in an election like this, you just need to ask yourself, are we better off than we were 4 years ago? When you ask yourself that question, then say, what's our trajectory? Are we headed in the right direction as a city? And when I've talked to literally thousands of people over the last year, the resounding response to that is we are not in a good place. We are in a worse place than we were with homelessness, with public safety, with affordability, with transportation. You can go on and talk about the things that are not going right in this city, and our trajectory is bad. And I wouldn't hear it every single day from people on the doors if it didn't have merit. And the fact is, that's exactly why we have elections, because you can say we need something new. And for us in District 1, and because I'm now endorsed by more than 100 of the local businesses that are the heart and soul of West Seattle and South Park, and I'm also endorsed by the Northwest Carpenters and the Seattle Times and Sheriff Joe Nick and there are more people that have endorsed me and more groups, but the fact is, it's the people in West Seattle that I am most proud of, and especially those businesses that are telling me they are being nickeled and dimed and death by 1,000 cuts out of business, and we don't want to lose what we've got. So the fact is, this is your opportunity to vote for change and to get yourself a voice that is going to make sure that change happens. I ask for your support and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause?